EBITDA adjustments part 2. So continuation from our thoughts from earlier this week, we talked about categorically what are the different types of expenses that are often added back to create a recasted or adjusted EBITDA. Today's video, we want to talk a little bit more about how it actually takes part in the process and what are some of the important things to focus on when discussing it. EBITDA adjustments among employment contracts, earnouts, are some of the more negotiated elements of a transaction, whether securing financing or seeking a sale of a business. And therefore, it's important to both say zealously as well as diplomatically have these discussions, because inevitably there will be some add backs that are accepted by a prospective acquirer or financier, and there's going to be some that are not. And there's a logical conversation to be had around each of these items. But the first important thing to do during the process that we undertake with every situation that we're involved with is to have all of these items clearly documented. And so we will call it a bridge or a reconciliation, but you really want to look at what is the in-place EBITDA, or what does the P&L look like that would port out of QuickBooks or that was on the tax returns, and then what are the bridging items, and therefore the adjustments made on each line item, and therefore tying out to adjusted EBITDA. And the worst thing that someone can do is hand over a big sloppy list of adjustments and then leave it to an acquirer or the financing party to figure out which line items those came out of. You want to make these as paint by numbers as possible, because the more clearly it can be perceived, the more logical the conversation can be, the more fruitful the negotiation can be. And so in every situation that we're involved with, we want to create that bridge or that reconciliation factor. And so A, communicating it clearly, B, having the support for it, right? And so that's important as well. It's easy to go back and say, hey, 5 years ago, I think we spent all of this money on this thing or this service or fixing this problem. But if it's not documented, it can be more difficult to substantiate. And acquirers are not as prejudicial on some of these things as some might think. There are some element that they'll be given some credit for that doesn't have to be scrutinized down to every last Big Mac bought on the road. But that being said, the vast majority of add backs need to be documented and substantiated in a way that you see the bridge, and then you would supply the support for each of the respective components of that bridge. And lastly, it's just the diplomatic and honest communication. And this is good, obviously, for all components of business, but particularly when it comes to the more negotiated elements of a transaction. If the same expense happened in the same exact amount for the same exact reason for the last 25 years, and without that expense, there would be a material impact on revenue, then it's really difficult to call that a non-recurring item. Things can be non-recurring post-transaction, even though they happen every year, but you have to detach or at least have a good explanation as to why that's not a fundamentally necessary piece of the business post-transaction, why that would not impact revenue, why that would not have a deleterious or negative impact on the going forward trajectory of the business. And so there's the red face test, if you will, that once all of these adjustments are documented and discussed internally, you really need to go through all of them, in which we do with all of our clients, to say, okay, these ones will hold water, these ones will be scrutinized, but we do think are legitimate. And then there's always a couple that will inevitably say, listen, let's just chuck these because we want to start this conversation off on the right foot with the prospective acquirers or capital providers. And we do find that those counterparties are very appreciative of that, and that they receive, kind of recapping the whole thoughts of this video, a clear bridge indicating the adjustments, substantiation and support for the adjustments, and then lastly, a bona fide list of adjustments and honest conversation and diplomacy, and having that negotiation that engenders goodwill and a generally minimal adversarial environment for the balance of the negotiations and conversation. We discuss buyers and sellers of businesses as counterparties, but at the end of the day, they're ultimately teams, whether for a short duration post-transaction or a longer one. And therefore, in that spirit, we do like to enter into all of these discussions and negotiations on the right foot. And that's what we do, and that's always the intent of our clients as well. Appreciate everybody's time today. Talking the other day about what are the main add backs, and today how it's actually part of the transaction and some key considerations in discussing these add backs. So that's the thought for today. Hope everyone's doing well. Keep pushing forward. God bless. We'll see everyone next time.